The Bible Institute of Los Angeles, Incorporated, half-century-old Christian Training Center of the West, presents Verse by Verse with Dr. Lewis T. Talbot, Biola Chancellor, and one of America's great evangelical leaders. And now, once again, your radio Bible teacher, Dr. Lewis T. Talbot.
And thank you, Mr. Announcer. Good morning, my radio friends and friends of the Bible Institute of Los Angeles. This is Lewis T. Talbot greeting you and welcoming you to another broadcast of Bible study. And I welcome you, as I always do, in the wonderful name of our soon-coming Lord. Now, the mornings of this week, we have had the privilege of having Dr. Paul Bauman on the radio. And Dr. Bauman, as you know, is the Vice President of the Brethren Seminary in Winona Lake, Indiana. And from him, we have obtained up-to-date information in regard to Palestine as it is today. And after listening to the answers that he has given to the questions that I put before him, I am sure that we are all convinced that we are living in the day when the fig tree is beginning to put forth her leaves, and that the age is rapidly coming to a close. Now, before we take up this discussion, let me make one or two announcements, very brief announcements, in view of the fact that the Lord's Day will be with us very shortly. And I do trust that all of you folks will be in some place of worship where the gospel is preached and where the word of God is believed, and particularly your own church, if you have the privilege of belonging to a church of this kind. Now, on Sunday morning and Sunday night, and continuing every night of next week, it'll be my privilege to give a series of prophetic messages in the Temple Baptist Church of Fullerton. Dr. Arthur Peters is the pastor, and the church is located at 1601 Malvern Street in Fullerton. I trust, my dear friends, that I'll have the privilege of seeing many of radio listeners who reside in that area. And then on the coming Lord's Day, Dr. Bauman will be speaking Sunday morning at the Monte Vista Brethren Church and the Los Altos Brethren Church on Sunday evening. And then tonight he is going to be at the Southgate Brethren Church. Possibly he'll say a word in regard to his meetings when he begins to answer the first question that I give to him. I want to thank all of you folks in Radio Land for the wonderful response that you have been making to the appeal that I have made for the Radio Memorial Dormitory that I'm very, very anxious to see erected on the campus at La Mirada. You know that this will make it possible for all of the students to be together, and thus save quite a number of them having to commute every morning from downtown by bus to La Mirada. We have about $25,000 for this building, but we'll need about $100,000 before we can start the building. And I want to assure you, my dear friends, it'll be a great joy to my heart when all of our students are living together on the campus. Now, next Monday, if the Lord tarry, that when we come together at 11 o'clock, we will continue the study in the book of Revelation, and I think that we have reached the beginning of chapter 11. And so you begin to read chapter 11, and on Monday, if the Lord tarry, that we will be together. Now, I present to you your friend and my friend, Dr. Bauman. And Dr. Bauman, it's been a real joy to be with you the mornings of this week, and you may say hello to all of your friends in Radio Land.
Well, thank you, Dr. Talbot. It's been a great privilege and a pleasure again. Reminds us of old times to sit at the microphone together as we join in the study of the Word of God. And I've been asked by Dr. Talbot to say something about tonight. When I speak in Southgate at the Brethren Church on Sequoia and Montera Streets, I'll be showing pictures and dealing with the subject Israel 10 years ago and today. Also Sunday night at Los Altos. The pictures will be on the same subject, Israel, 10 years ago and today.
Yes, and Dr. Bauman, don't be surprised if you see me show up tonight in the meeting. Now, Dr. Bauman, yesterday we were discussing the judgments that fell upon the city of Jerusalem because of its apostasy, and at the conclusion of the broadcast we were considering the prophecy of Micah 3:12, where we read, "Zion shall be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps." Now, you will remember that we saw the hill of Zion when we were in Jerusalem some years ago, and the whole face of it seemed to be a plowed field even today. Now, what is the meaning and the significance of the other part of this prophecy, Jerusalem shall become heaps? Now, what is the meaning of that statement?
Dr. Talbot, the average traveler who visits the city of Jerusalem today little realizes that the streets over which he walks are not actually the streets on which Jesus and his disciples walked 1900 years ago. As a matter of fact, the city of Jerusalem has been destroyed again and again, and its ruins and its ashes leveled off, and then the city rebuilt. And particularly was that true in the days when the Roman armies under Titus the Roman destroyed the city in fulfillment of the prediction which Jesus had made that not one stone would be left standing upon another. And the streets of Jerusalem today are anywhere from 10 feet to 90 feet above the level of the streets of the city as it was in the days of Christ, and particularly in the days when this prophecy was uttered. And so, as one travels through the streets today, occasionally he comes to a place of excavation, as I did last spring at the Pool of Bethesda. It's necessary to go down about 30 or 40 feet to get to the Pool of Bethesda today, and an archaeologist was digging out a large arch, the very top of which was about 20 to 25 feet below the present level of the city. And so that prophecy has been literally fulfilled. Jerusalem became heaps.
Well, that is very, very interesting indeed. Now, Dr. Bauman, we have been speaking about the judgments that were to fall upon the city of Jerusalem, and we have seen how, through the course of the centuries, these have been literally fulfilled. Now, there are in the Bible also some prophecies that speak of the restoration and the rebuilding of Jerusalem in what the Bible calls the last days, that are associated with the return of the Lord and the establishment of his kingdom. I am speaking particularly of the one located in the 31st chapter of Jeremiah. Are you familiar with that prophecy? I guess you are.
Yes, Dr. Talbot, I think that's one of the most remarkable prophecies in the entire Bible that has to do especially with the restoration of a city. This is located in the last portion of Jeremiah 31, and God here says that the days come, verse 38, saith the Lord, that the city shall be built to the Lord. And you'll notice, Dr. Talbot, that 2,600 years ago, God directed Jeremiah not only to predict the rebuilding of the city of Jerusalem, but actually he marked out the very lines around which the city would be rebuilt. And so he begins with the landmark from the Tower of Anil unto the gate of the corner. And verse 39 says, the measuring line shall yet go forth over against it upon the hill Gareb, and shall compass about to Goath. And so there are some landmarks at least which time has not been able to erase, and it's along the western side of Jerusalem, down toward the south where the Tower of Anil was located, and the hills on the western side, that the city has been rebuilt over the course of the last few years. And it is significant that that arc running around the western side and then on around the northern side to the brook Kidron is the very line of rebuilding mentioned by Jeremiah 2,600 years ago.
And Doctor, I notice in the Bible that is open before you in verse 40 in this 31st chapter that there is a reference to the valley of dead bodies. Now, what is this, Doctor? And weren't we there when we were traveling through Palestine some 10 years ago, I think that we visited a place called the Tomb of the Kings on the north side of the city. Did we not?
Yes, we did, Dr. Talbot, and this is generally agreed upon as the Valley of Dead Bodies mentioned by Jeremiah. At least out in that northern part was the place where a number of the high men of Israel were buried. In fact, last spring I visited also the tombs of the Sanhedrin, or the rulers of Israel, which is also on the north and out toward the northwest, in fact, and those tombs are actually in Israel. The tombs of the kings, so-called, are in the Arab portion, but significantly both of them lie along the north and the northwestern portions of the Old City, that is outside the gates of the Old City, but to the north. And the new part of Jerusalem is all around that particular location.
And, Doctor, in this same verse, Jeremiah mentions what he calls the ashes. Now, what is the reference to the ashes? What is the meaning of that statement?
Well, Dr. Talbot, that is a most significant statement, for 50 years ago, there were outside the city of Jerusalem on the north huge piles of ashes, 40 feet high. Now, those ashes had been there through the course of a good many centuries. They were the dumping places for ashes that had been taken from the temple sacrifices in the city of Jerusalem. And over the years, they accumulated a considerable height. The ashes are such that no one could take a picture of them today because they were removed as the city began to be rebuilt. And over that very spot today are lovely buildings. Many of these ashes were taken and made into lime to cement even the brick together that went into the rebuilding of the city. I have pictures of the ashes, but they were taken about 40 years ago and were outside even of our experience. But the significant fact is that the city lies along that very line again, lines which can't be mistaken by one who knows something of the history of that country.
Now, Doctor, isn't there a passage somewhere that speaks of the cities being built out over what was called the king's wine presses? That detail doesn't seem to be in this passage, is it?
No, Dr. Talbot. It comes from a passage that is very similar in the 14th chapter of Zechariah. And we read, beginning at verse 9, "The Lord shall be king over all the earth. In that day there shall be one Lord, and his name one." And you'll notice that this is a messianic prophecy also. And then the very next verse, verse 10, Zechariah 14, "The land shall be turned as a plain," and so on. And then he says, Jerusalem shall be lifted up and inhabited in her place, from Benjamin's gate unto the place of the first gate, unto the corner gate, from the tower of Anil, the very one mentioned, you'll notice, by Jeremiah, unto the king's wine presses, and men shall dwell in it. And there shall be no more utter destruction, but Jerusalem shall be safely inhabited. And the interesting detail is this one called the king's wine presses. Again, about 30 to 40 years ago, there were out on the north side of the city of Jerusalem just one little spot in the midst of a lot of desolation, the king's wine presses. And again, I have a picture of that, but no visit to the Holy Land would produce a picture of that kind. The ruins of the old wine places in the midst of desolation. But today, that whole area is covered by houses that belong to the city of Jerusalem. And so we have just another detail that pins down this very line of rebuilding around which the city would be constructed.
And, Doctor, it seems to me that the details in regard to these prophecies just mark the great prophecies to be the word of the living God. It's wonderful how, indeed, they have been fulfilled to the letter. Now, I also see here that Jeremiah predicted that the buildings would continue clear around to the brook Kidron. Now, is this where the line of the new city ends?
Yes, Dr. Talbot, that is the significant part as one considers the present city of Jerusalem. And If you were to go there today and go up on the Mount of Olives and look out over the city, you could there see both the old city and the new. And I have taken many pictures to try to represent how the building, just to show how the building begins on the southwest side. It swings up along the west side of the old city and then completely around the north side. And it is most remarkable indeed that this rebuilding ends at the Kidron Valley. You remember it was across the little brook Kidron that Jesus went into the Garden of Gethsemane, or back across when he was betrayed by Judas and was led into the city to face his accusers. And that line is so clearly seen by one who may look out over the city of Jerusalem that he cannot escape it. And we might well ask how it can be that there's no building along the eastern side. There's none along the southern side. But the main area of rebuilding of that wonderful new city, which has now reached a population of about 200,000 people. Now, that's the Jewish city, in addition to the old city within the walls, which is Arab. And that wonderful new city is all built on those two sides, particularly mentioned by Jeremiah. The other two lie practically empty. How did Jeremiah know that? We might consider that perhaps.
Yes, and Dr. Bauman, tell us a little about Jerusalem as you saw it last April and May, as you were there at that time.
Well, Jerusalem is a wonderful city. It contains buildings that are just as modern as anything that we would see here in the United States. There's the King David Hotel, a very fine hotel, has its all of its accommodations that you would find in any hotel in America. A $1 million YMCA building is immediately across the street from the King David Hotel, given by an American philanthropist. And then last spring, a portion of our party was in the King's Hotel, a lovely new hotel. These are just samples. A marvelous post office building, which would be a credit to any American city. And then I think I was impressed, perhaps to some extent even more, by the loveliness of the new campus of the Hebrew University. The old campus had fallen into no man's land during the war between the Jew and the Arabs. And you remember up on Mount Scopus, Dr. Talbot, we were able to see it from a distance, completely closed along with the Hadassah Hospital. But they've gone out to the western side, the very part Jeremiah mentioned, and they have taken the rocks and used those rocks to construct some of the most beautiful buildings one could possibly imagine. And that campus, that university, has an enrollment now of about 10,000 students. These, along with the other remarkable new apartment house buildings that are going out to meet this campus, impress one with the tremendous restoration that is going on at Jerusalem, unparalleled in past history. And one certainly cannot guess at the significance of these things if he knows his Bible.
And my friends, I want to interject here by saying it is a remarkable thing that a man like Jeremiah, who lived more than 2,600 years ago, could look over the span of the centuries and mark out the very lines along which the city of Jerusalem would be rebuilt in these last days. Now, how could Jeremiah know these things 26 centuries before they happened? Well, the answer is that he couldn't have known them. He was writing by inspiration. That is, that the Spirit of God put the telescope of prophecy to his eye, and he looked down through the ages, and he saw the things that we are actually seeing coming into being these days. How very wonderful is the fulfillment of prophecy. And this, my dear friends, is one of the evidences of the truth of the Word of God. You know that we're living in a day when unbelief is spreading in various forms, but there was never a day, my dear friend, when we have more reason to believe that the Bible is the Word of God as in our day. Well, would you like to add a word in regard to that, Doctor?
Yes, Dr. Talbot, I think there's only one conclusion a person can come to who knows the Word of God and who reads that in one hand and the newspaper in the other, that this book cannot possibly be a human book. Only God can read the future.
Yes, now we read We read about some of the tremendous developments that are going on down there in the desert portion of Israel, such as Beersheba. That was a town that is in the southern portion of the Holy Land, and Abraham, you'll remember, visited Beersheba in his day. And we read that he dug a well there, I think. Now, I wonder if you ever had the opportunity of seeing this city of Beersheba that is mentioned so prominently in the Old Testament.
Yes, Dr. Talbot, I had the privilege of going down to Beersheba last spring, and this city is a most remarkable city. The Bible tells us that there was some considerable civilization down in this desert area in the days of Abraham. In fact, some of the unbelievers had thought that the Bible exaggerated, and they questioned whether there were the cities down there that the Bible mentions. However, during the past 20 years, or a little less, Nelson Glueck of Cincinnati, the Hebrew Seminary at Cincinnati, has been carrying on systematic researches in that area, and he's located the ruins of many cities and settlements there, dating clear back to the days of Abraham, and in a wonderful way verifying the Bible. Now, the town of Beersheba at one time in Abraham's day was a place of some consequence, but as a part of the judgment that was to fall upon the Holy Land in its entirety. This city dwindled until about 40 years ago there was a miserable little town there of mud huts, not more than about 250 people. But in recent years, that city has taken on a tremendous growth. And this will give you some idea. For example, back in 1950, it had become a municipality numbering about 1,400 people. Now, that's only 10 years ago. But let me show you, Dr. Talbot, what can happen in 10 years. During the past 10 years, that city has continued to grow there in the desert until in 1958, just 8 years later, it had a population of 40,000 people. And 98% of those people had permanent homes. And all but 5% of them had steady jobs, and this comes from their own government statistics. It's estimated that by 1968, the city will have a population of at least 100,000 people, and that would be more than were in all of the Holy Land 50 years ago.
Yes, well, that is indeed wonderful. Now, Doctor, here is another thing. We have reason to believe that King Solomon had his copper mines down in the desert on the Gulf of the Red Sea. Have you ever been there, and are those mines in operation today?
Dr. Talbot, I had always wanted to visit the copper mines of King Solomon. In fact, some years ago, the archaeologists had located his old smelting town of Ezion Geber, the old seaport. And they even discovered the quays, the docks excavated, because it's become filled with sand, and the actual shoreline of the Red Sea, or the Gulf of Aqaba, is south of it a couple of miles or so at the present time. But they located these, and in addition to that, they found actually some of the old blast furnaces that belonged to the days of King Solomon. And by the way, one thing which they discovered there reveals something of the wisdom of Solomon, which is described in the Bible, by a very ingenious principle, only rediscovered in modern times with the invention of the so-called Bessemer flue, or the Bessemer furnace. They had actually designed a flue for their blast furnaces that would take advantage of the prevailing winds to fan the flames so that they would be hot enough to smelt copper. And then they took advantage of those same winds to fan the noxious or poisonous gases out over the Red Sea, where they wouldn't become dangerous to human life. I wasn't able to get to Ezion Geber. It's an Arab territory, and I was in Israel territory there. But I did go to another place where they located some of the evidences of his smelting furnaces, and there were huge piles of slag. And I brought home a piece of that slag along with some of the copper ore. Would you like to know about some of the developments there, Dr. Talbot, in the reopening of those mines?
Yes, we would, but we've only got about 5 minutes, and I've got 15 other questions that I want you to answer. Now, Doctor, let me ask this. Say, go ahead and give this information.
Well, I can give that very quickly, Dr. Talbot. I visited a large smelting furnace there from the reopening of those mines, taking a hint from the Bible, which is always the best authority. They have reopened those mines and are developing them by strip mining today, and are mining copper. One of the richest strikes in Israel was made the very week I was down at Eilat.
Yes. Now, Doctor, right along this line, you'll remember that when we were in Palestine, we made a visit to the Dead Sea. I remember that we went in swimming there one day, and the water was so full of salt that even though you couldn't swim a stroke, there you were floating on top of the water like no man's business. But you know that the Dead Sea is the richest chemical deposit of its kind in the world. What is being done to develop the mineral resources of the Dead Sea?
Well, in the first place, I might make a correction here for the benefit of our friends. If I remember correctly, Dr. Talbot, I was holding you up most of the time, and if I was sinking, it was an effort to hold you above water. However, that wasn't necessary in the Dead Sea. Do you know, our friends, too, will be interested in knowing this, that the Dead Sea lies 1,300 feet below sea level, and it contains, on the average, 8 times more salts than ocean water. And it's no figure of speech to say that Israel's life can be made to flourish by the effective use of the rich minerals in what was previously regarded as a region of death. And the Dead Sea today is giving up its salts. By the end of 1957, production of these minerals was at 7,500 tons a month. And at the present time, the annual rate is about 120,000 tons of potash. These potashes are used for medicines, for munitions, for fertilizer, and a great variety of uses that will help to make this country a self-sustaining economy.
Yeah. I'd like to ask Dr. Bauman, we just have about 2 more minutes. I'd like to ask, what was the most impressive of all the visits that we made together? What about Petra? How do you think that Petra, the city of Petra, the rose-red city of the dead, would rank in the order of interest?
Well, I think that was one of the 7 wonders of at least the day, and Petra was one of the most thrilling experiences I had. I believe that it's in that area, unquestionably, that the Jewish remnant will be miraculously preserved when the Antichrist turns the flames of all of his satanic hatred upon them. And certainly back in that area must be the place, because it's the only place to which they could flee. And I hope maybe we can return there someday, Dr. Talbot.
Yes, and I hope, Doctor, not only that we may return there, but that we may lead an expedition down there so that all of our radio audience could go along. Do you remember that when we were sleeping down there, we went into one of the buildings, and there were 13 skulls there, and we decided not to stay there, so we went into another building, and there were 20 skulls, and then we went back to the one with the 13. Well, thank you, my friends, and have a great time on the coming Lord's Day. This is Louis T. Talbot and Dr. Bauman signing off. Goodbye, and God bless you all.
We've a story to tell to the nations that shall turn their hearts to the right. A story of truth and blessing, a story of peace and light, a story of peace and light.
You've been listening to your radio Bible teacher, Dr. Louis T. Talbot, Chancellor of the Bible Institute of Los Angeles, Incorporated. Address all mail to Dr. Louis T. Talbot, 558 South Hope Street, Los Angeles 17, California.
We've a story to tell to the nation.